everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. I'll be your astrologer today. Happy Tuesday, everyone. I hope your guys' weekend was awesome. We are back at it with another video, and we're going to be taking a look at this up and coming full moon in the sign of Gemini. If you guys like my content and you want to see more of it, make sure you click that bell button below, subscribe to my channel. I'm here every Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday using tarot and astrology, trying to make sense of what's going on in the cosmos. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. If you like this video, consider sharing it on your social media, giving me a thumbs up, and leaving me a comment below. Where is this full moon falling in your natal chart? What aspects is it making? And how are you making your way through some of the squares that are kind of going on at this time? I'll let you guys know that this has almost like faint kind of connections actually to the new moon that seeded this full moon. We saw some similar aspects kind of going on at that time, so we'll definitely take a look at it. And before we get into it, just to remind you guys that we do talk about all of the lunations in my horoscopes for December. We have got 2 new moons and a full moon happening in December. So some of you guys are just kind of coming off of that new moon in Sag, but yeah, all of the lunations are covered this month in the horoscope, so make sure you check that out. We are also just wrapping up all of our sales that we had since last week over the holiday weekend. So those of you guys who were able to scoop up some sales with the courses and some of the products and stuff, thank you guys for supporting me as a content creator, as well as a YouTuber and everything else, sir. You know, mugs, bags, courses, all that stuff. So I hope you guys were able to get some stuff. But we are still going to have all of our products available. So if you guys decide that you want to pick up a calendar for next year, we have digital and printed versions of my 12 months of astrology, all the transits, the big ones, also ritual recommendations, and you get a tarot card reading each month with a QR code. So it's really cool. You can get it in a printed version or a digital version. And we are also still offering our early bird tickets. You guys want to get those before mid-December if you want to get 20% off of your ticket price to join me for my 2025 New Year's Day astrology webinar. Come and ring in the new year with me. I'd love to hang out with you guys and talk about what next year has in store. And if you guys are interested, you can also pick up gift cards on my website. You can find all of that at beyondtheveiltarot.com. as well as personal readings. So guys, I'm already booking into March of 2025. So if you know that you are like an Aquarius, a Pisces, or an Aries, and you want to get a reading next year, consider booking your session sooner rather than later. And I have, I think, like maybe 1 or 2 of the 12-month personal horoscope reading offerings available. I only limited it to 12. So I'm only going to be taking a couple more, but if you want me to basically really kind of put together your horoscope for all of 2025, I'm doing an in-depth reading where I take a look at all of the nodal changes, the eclipses, the retrogrades, the planetary ingresses. I take some information from you about what your goals are for 2025, what you want to accomplish this year, what you're focusing on, and I help you navigate the entire 12-month period of 2025, giving you the best dates for love, finances, relationships, travel, health, business, and much more. So it's like the most in-depth personalized horoscope you can get, and there's 2 of those left, so check that out. All right, so we have got a lot going on, obviously. The astrology at the beginning of December, really into mid-month, is just a bit of a hodgepodge of a lot of mutable transits that are happening. So I feel like both the full moon in Gemini, which we're going to look at, the Mercury retrograde in Sag, and the squares to Saturn are all kind of saying the same thing. So you're going to notice that there's a lot of similarities that are kind of coming up in this particular lunation that's echoing some of these mutable squares that are taking place the whole first half of December. Now the full moon in Gemini, obviously we have this once a year. It's whenever the sun is in Sag and the moon is in Gemini. This is going to be happening this year on December 15th, 2024. Now, some of you guys are watching this early. You've noticed I get into the habit right when we have a full moon, right after it, I put out the new moon video, and I try to kind of stay on top of it so that way you guys know what's kind of coming, and you can kind of see what's happening. So many of you guys are watching on the 3rd, maybe the 4th, but we're going to go ahead and scan ahead, and we're going to go and look at this full moon. So this will be on December 15th, 2024. I know we have people in all different time zones. I'm here in Texas on Central Time. So for me, it's going to be around 3:01 a.m. But if you are on the Pacific Coast here in the United States, it's going to be around 1:01 a.m. And if you're on the Eastern Coast, it's going to be around 4:01 a.m. Obviously, check your time zones, adjust accordingly. But for most of us in this part of the world, it's going to be very, very early. And this is a new moon. Okay, excuse me. This is a full moon. So this is about some kind of major completion or something kind of coming to fruition. Full moons always highlight something. So it's highlighting some kind of polarity between two particular signs. So it kind of makes things feel bigger. It makes emotions feel bigger. And there's usually some kind of like conclusion or completion that's tied to a full moon. Now, the storyline of this full moon goes back 6 months ago. So if you look at what was kind of happening in your life or in the area of your life of Gemini, what intentions you were setting in early June of 2024, now everything is kind of coming full circle. So I'll make sure I go and show you guys that chart before we kind of finish the video today. The full moon will be happening at 23 degrees of Gemini. So if you happen to have anything around 22, 23, 24 of Gemini, if you have a planet there, if you have an angle there, if it's like your sun, your moon, your rising, obviously this is going to be a little bit more impactful for you. And it might represent some kind of major personal completion or some major emphasis on that particular house or planet. So this is where it really pays to know your personal astrology. It will also be impacting the 22 to about 24 degrees of the mutable signs. So not just Gemini, but Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces. You guys are going to be feeling this too, as it's going to be squaring some of your personal planets within these degrees if you happen to have any there. So pay attention to that. Many of you guys aren't really fazed by this because you're already dealing with some ongoing squares between, Jupiter and Saturn, Neptune, and also, Mercury retrograde and Sag. So some of you guys are already kind of working with these energies. It's just something coming in that's going to be kind of like highlighting the square, the mutable square that's taking place between Saturn and also planets that are in Sagittarius. So it's amplifying some of the themes of what's happening earlier in the month of December, and then it kind of hits its peak when it gets into Gemini. Obviously it's at 23 degrees. Okay, so this is a degree that I always say this is like where the wheels fall off. 23 degrees in a positive sense has connections and associations with obviously Aquarius. So if you follow degree astrology, you know that 23s are about like innovation. It's about technology. It can be like where things are speeding up. There can be sudden changes. There can be sudden surprises. We do see an emphasis on things that are Aquarian-like friendships and social networks, as well as the themes of liberation. Freedom kind of comes up when we think about 23s. The downside of 23s is we can see quite literal or figurative like explosions happening in our life, right? Explosive events. We can also see that there can be sudden separations. 23s do have connections that kind of are about cutting or breaking away from something or someone. So often this is related to relationships. This is a degree that has an association with splitting off from traditional paths or groups. But I have seen it kind of come up for some people, especially if it has connections or associations, sometimes with like the 5th house, the 7th house, the 8th house, with relationship separations as well. With that being said, even though this sounds like, there is going to be like this like sudden, unexpected thing happening. Personally, I don't think it's very unexpected. I think that it was seeded 6 months ago that we knew that there was going to be something that we were breaking away from, or that we were trying to kind of move away from, because we saw some squares to Saturn with that new moon. Still kind of lingering with this one, but to be honest with you, it's more so in a square to Neptune, which could be more about clarity, transparency, understanding, sympathy, emotions, psychic sensitivity. And we know that Gemini is a sign that deals with, obviously, communication. So Gemini is things like the radio, the news. It could be also social media related. It could be connected to print and magazines, things revolving around, just like media in general. So I put the pieces together. You guys know I always look at the astrology and then I'm like, okay, what's kind of going on in the world, and kind of connect the dots. And I would say this is a full moon that you're really, 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 really going to want to be paying attention to where you're getting your information from, okay? Because a full moon in Gemini is highlighting the themes of information. But we know that, the ruler is debilitated. Not only is it retrograde, but it's in a sign where it does not really perform very well. It's in its opposite sign of Sagittarius, where we lose track of like the details. And we also see that there is this ongoing kind of square that's been happening with Saturn, which has been issues revolving around like transparency and clarity and, information and responsibility, and lack of that with Saturn being in Pisces. And then we also see that the sun and the moon are both kind of square to Neptune. So it's like Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, right? It's something, a story is going in one direction and then it goes in another, or somebody tells us one thing and then they say something else, and like we don't really know where it's going. So there is this sense of there being this heightened emotional response and reaction to data, news, information, communications, travel, maybe big news pertaining also to like media companies. But a lot of this big news is like, well, wait, why did they say this? Or like, why was there this narrative? Or why is that media network going under? Why is it dissolving? Why is it disappearing? And you're going to see that, there is this shift towards duality, or we're seeing it now, duality in information and media, having more than one source, right? Gemini is about doubles, keeping an open mind, seeing a different perspective. And then also by the same token, like the squares to Neptune can mean that if we become so consumed or focused on one narrative or one belief system or like one idea, that it actually keeps us from being able to see the bigger picture, right? And it's just kind of mirroring some of the themes of Mercury retrograde and Sag, that we're supposed to be kind of getting out of our small kind of like bubble, and we're supposed to be zooming out and kind of looking at the global themes of what's going on in the world. And Sagittarius can be about education, it could be about travel, it could be about legal kind of proceedings and things of that nature. And the squares to Saturn and Neptune, a lot of it's going to be dealing with, corruption, crime, things that are happening behind closed doors, where there has been lack of transparency. That's been the biggest issue, I think, with Saturn and Neptune. And I've been telling everybody this last year, I'm like, wait until Saturn and Neptune are direct. Wait until they get into the later degrees of Pisces. And now they're both direct, so we're going to be seeing them kind of like full steam ahead between now and the spring of 2025. Where there's just a god-awful amount of transits happening in the late degrees of Pisces, and it's going to be this grand revealing. So the question is with a full moon in Gemini, we're more chatty, we're more mobile, there's more information, things are flowing, we have the ability to multitask, we have the ability also to share information pretty freely. Are we going to be able to do that when we have this full moon? I don't know. Are we going to have all of our wits about ourselves? I don't know, because the square to Neptune makes us unsure. There could be issues with honesty, transparency. There could be also issues in feeling like open or capable of being able to communicate or share. We might be struggling where we feel a little conflicted between our emotions and also like our feelings, and expressing that, putting the words, down or on paper, or being able to have the conversations. And being afraid to say things, or quite literally, the literal representation, I think, of like Jupiter in Gemini and the Mercury retrograde and the Sun in Sagittarius is a lot of people being like, am I going to be criticized for saying something right now? Am I going to be, kind of like feeling like an outsider? The Saturn Neptune very much in Pisces is still, I think, the tail end of like this cancel culture that's been going on, and maybe where some people have felt abandoned or victimized in some way because of speaking out or saying something, or fear of saying something. So that's still kind of coming around right now. We're still seeing some of that right now. That's not kind of over yet. And obviously, I try to look at everything from all of the different angles. Granted, the squares to Saturn and Neptune does feel like there is something still being thwarted, or we're still working through something, or something still coming to light, and we're having to wait maybe until the end of the Mercury retrograde for some of this stuff to kind of reveal itself. But this is a full moon that is relatively close to Jupiter, okay? So Jupiter is about truth. Jupiter in Gemini is like, people are gonna have different truths or different perspectives. Jupiter is retrograde, so it means that we're gonna have to kind of dig deep and reevaluate, you know, how we're thinking, how we're feeling, and find the words. So we have to go back and rethink something or rewrite something or reword something. And that may bring us some kind of benefit, some kind of positive, you know, thing. Now, with the moons, you guys know when I read the Sabian symbols, I always round up. So I'm gonna round up and I'm gonna read to you 24 degrees of Gemini today. And this symbol is associated with children skating on ice. That is the symbol. And the key word is fun. So the theme is about adventures and experience, and the symbol speaks to excitement and heightened anticipation of enjoyment. The ever-present danger of neglecting or failing to properly maintain foundations. It can also speak to the need to be ready and prepared to handle all unexpected demands that may arise. The image of children skating on ice dramatizes the spirit of adventure as well as innocent, but somewhat naive obliviousness to the realities of skating on thin ice, or the hazards that prevent any risky situation. The emphasis here in the symbol is having clearly established goals and recognizing every success is merely stepping stone to greater achievement. On a practical level, it's about never surrendering to things are fine as it is level type of complacency, or succumbing to delusions of feeling adequate. At its highest, the symbol represents joy, self-discovery, thought, and endless adventure. Watch for thrill-seeking and the inability to sense real danger. The accent is on caution. There could be a hidden danger in some adventure. The opportunity. Your greatest advantage lies in making sure that you're standing out on solid ground or firm foundations before you perform any intricate maneuver. Be prepared for the unexpected. Guard against complacency and assuming that things were fine the last time you looked and that they still are. Don't press your luck. It isn't always the other fellow who gets hurt. Stepping stones are danger, hazard, thrill-seeking, risk, fun, adventure, escapade, excitement, and obliviousness. Which I have to just laugh, you know, because of some of the aspects that are kind of going on with the chart that's in front of me. There's like a million things that I'm looking at. Probably when I think of like issues of visibility, I think of Neptune, or I think of Pisces. And Pisces is the sign of water, right? So literally skating on ice, not knowing if there is, you know, thin ice somewhere that you can fall through. You know, Saturn's there, it's cold. I mean, in this case, this could be quite literal. If you are going to be anywhere where there's going to be colder weather, maybe, you know, Gemini, you're driving, you're walking, you're riding your bike, you know, be mindful that there could be issues or problems with weather. There could be issues with water. There could be problems with ice. I also think about the fact that the ruler of this particular Sabian symbol is Mercury, and Mercury obviously we know is retrograde, but it will actually be going direct later in the day on the 15th. So Mercury is stationing at the time of this full moon, which makes it pretty damn significant. It means there's some big news that's going to be coming out, or some big statement that's going to be coming out. And Mercury is at a 6, which is a degree that deals with health, jobs, services, particularly like health and accidents kind of come up with 6s. And, you know, we talk about how this Sabian symbol is about like being cautious and making sure that before you do anything crazy, you know, make sure you have your firm footing, like literally or figuratively. Before you say something, you know what you're talking about, know where you stand, right? And that's very important also with, I think, a full moon in Gemini square Saturn, because there's a sense of being like, it's not just, not just having pretty words, and that's been the Mercury retrograde too, not just having pretty words, but like having something that you can back it up with. Information, facts, data, you know, committing to something, not just kind of saying something kind of haphazardly and then, you know, being nonchalant about it. Like people are going to be, I think, more so held accountable for what they say and how they communicate and what information they're kind of putting out. And I think just in a nutshell, you know, this full moon is definitely looking like the reckoning for media networks. And this could be good or bad, okay? So I'm kind of neutral. It can be good in a sense where if there's been certain outlets that have not been factual or honest or, if they have been manipulating information, you know, the reckoning is definitely going to be the square to Saturn, where the full moon is going to be highlighting this. And then the square to Saturn is like, some of them may go under, some of them may be held accountable, some of them may also be legally held accountable for walking back statements and correcting information and things or narratives that have been put out. It could be negative in a sense where, you know, this is still screaming this incoming Saturn square Jupiter, where this is the very same aspects that we see where there is some intention to limit or thwart communications or speech. Like literally free speech is Jupiter and Gemini. I don't think it gets any more free speech than that. Maybe Mercury and Sag, but we have both, you know? And both of these are squaring Saturn, which means that there is both an agenda to get out with this information, get information out that's been withheld, but also knowing that certain information is going to be coming to light in the next couple of months, an effort to really thwart people's ability to share information. And it's going to be, I think, like more data-based. It may be connecting somehow to also, social media, right? Like that's very possible. Jupiter in Gemini I see as like this like leader that's for free speech and communications. And we see like Saturn squaring, so it could mean that there are going to be some, people within higher ranks, and this could be in companies, this could be in government, that like don't want that kind of freedom. It could also represent where there's been people who have maybe done, Jupiter a disservice in the past, and like now there is like some kind of like reckoning, like Jupiter's trying to kind of break away from Saturn and kind of say, hey, now it's important to have free speech and communication, specifically on I use media and social media because Jupiter is in Gemini. I've kind of been thinking about this, and I've thought that this was going to be a time where some people would actually change directions in their belief system, and they're considering a different perspective, which I think is positive to keep an open mind and like not side on one particular side of a situation or a story rather than the other. The truth is usually somewhere in the middle, right? But I've been watching like social media, and it's been interesting to hear things like Mark Zuckerberg, who is notorious for, obviously, runs Facebook, whatever, but notorious for like collaborating and connecting previously during the last elections with the US government in, censorship, also, looking at what people are saying and like obviously invading people's privacy and impacting what people can actually see on social media. And so now we're hearing, stories about how Mark Zuckerberg is like meeting with like Trump at Mar-a-Lago. And I'm like, this is so crazy to see like, the Jupiter Saturn square is setting up, and somebody who has blatantly come out and said, hey, now I want to be associated with the freedom movement. I regret some of the things that I did in the past. I should not have had some of the openness and the willingness to kind of, I'm not going to say collaborate, but collaborate, with big tech and government. So now we're seeing this change in the narrative, right? So I think that, to be honest with you, there are going to be some people at the time of the full moon that are going to have a difficult time grappling with some of the information that's coming out, because some of it's going to just seem like totally Looney Tunes. We're going to hear that there's like suddenly a completely different direction or a 180 on certain narratives, and like things that we have been told that are going to go in one direction are now suddenly going in another direction. And people can have a really hard time dealing with reality because of the squares of Saturn and Neptune. And there can be this sense of being like, wait, why is this happening? Or why is this coming out? Or like, what's going on? And I'm just going to go out on a limb here and assume that, if you're somebody who's watching my content, you probably are somewhere in the middle in terms of, your perspective with what's going on in the world, and you realize that it's not all black and white. But I'm going to tell you that there are going to be some people who are going to have a really, really hard time with reality around the time of this full moon. And it's funny in a sense where finally everything is kind of breaking down, and we're going to start to see why certain narratives were put out into the world and like the impacts that it had on people collectively. But it's not funny, because squares to Neptune bring up major mental health issues, addiction issues, emotional situations, feelings of like, hopelessness. Like there can definitely be like this fracture with reality, and then it's like, but this is what I've always believed. How could this not be true? And I would just say, buckle up, because there's going to be a lot of this basically between now and next year. There's going to be a lot of this, a lot of disclosure. So this is the beginning of like that starting to kind of break down. Anyway, so going back to the kids skating on ice, I would say that the danger could be just blatantly accepting any information at face value. The danger could be, you know, repeating something and sharing something that we don't know if it's true or not. The danger could be, you know, not speaking up or against something. And I say this because all of the squares to Saturn and Neptune are like the danger, you know? Obviously, when we think of this Sabian symbol, the positive is that it can be really bringing up the fact that we do need to have joy. We need to have playtime. We need to have time to just kind of be free. And this is about, you know, pleasure and engaging in things that are going to be lighter. And there's like a need for that. So maybe like with the North Node, you know, kind of making some aspects to Mercury. It's in a trine to Mercury. It's saying that like, hey, you know, we need to have the ability to tell stories and share and laugh. Jupiter is about laughter. It's about comedy. I think with this full moon, you know, a little bit of comedy is going to go a long way. I think that we may be laughing at some things that, you know, we're joking around being like, oh, this thing could happen, only to realize, you know, a couple of months down the road that some of the stuff that we were joking about or kind of poking fun at was real. It was not something that was fake, or maybe we're using a sense of like humor to like approach certain things, you know, but needing to kind of keep that that joy and keep things a little bit more lighthearted, I guess I should say, is helpful during this particular full moon. I think about ice skating and that it requires you to have a sense of balance and skill and like coordination. And it can symbolize like the need to navigate life's challenges with like grace and the ability to adapt quickly to changing conditions. And that very much is the mutable square is happening. I think it's about mastering the art of living in the moment and maintaining your equilibrium, which could be a little bit challenging to do right now, but Mercury being associated with, you know, with Gemini and being retrograde is saying that we're really reevaluating where are we going, what are we doing, and like being able to kind of work out all of the details so that way things can feel like a little bit more smooth. And maybe that's happening in the Gemini area of your chart. Maybe that's happening in the Sagittarius area of your chart. It's hard to say, but something is getting kind of reworked to make it easier for you to find balance throughout the retrograde. Caution and risk, you know, obviously ice skating, it's fun, but there's like an element of risk that comes into play and like the need to really pay attention to the conditions of the ice. So it can be seen almost as like a metaphor for like life's pleasures needing to be approached with caution, awareness, and respect for your limits and like knowing when to not overdo it, which has definitely been a theme, you know, leading up to this full moon. You know, the Mercury is in opposition to Jupiter. The sun is going to oppose Jupiter prior to this. We see a moon conjunct Jupiter. And what is like moon, Jupiter, and Gemini? You know, too much conversation, driving too fast, taking on too much, balancing things, you know, too much at one time. It's almost like, you know, I feel like with a full moon in Gemini, there's going to be so much information and data coming in that it's just like mind-boggling. And like there's almost like too much for you to be able to kind of, you know, take in all at one time. So definitely like take your time, you know, pace yourself. We don't need to kind of make any big decisions. We want to wait until like the dust kind of settles, which will be closer to the new year. I do think that there is this kind of connection with Jupiter to obviously to learning, and also with ice skating to learning. You know, the act of learning to skate is definitely not an easy thing to do if you have had to learn either as a kid or as an adult. And obviously learning new skills and having the courage to try something new. So it's about the journey of overcoming fears and doubts to engage in, you know, life's adventures fully. And I feel like, you know, ice is also temporary, so it can symbolize that whatever's going on right now, you know, it's kind of like a transient nature of life's moments and joy. It's about like really being present, and that the conditions like the ice can change, teaching us about the sense of things like not being permanent. So like things are always kind of changing. Anyway, that was my take on that. Obviously, the general theme would be like, have fun, just be careful, and be cautious, you know, not to kind of like get into territory where, you know, it could be kind of challenging or troubling. And I would say with this being in Gemini, it's like, you know, how much fun is too much fun, or how much is too much? Are we overdoing it? And like, are we not practicing a sense of, I think restraint or moderation, I guess is a good word for like some of the squares with Saturn. And for some of us, it's that we've been holding back and now we finally want to go somewhere. Now we finally want to say something. We want to learn something. For others, it's, putting our foot in our mouth. So it's going to depend on where it's kind of happening in your chart. I would say just generally, a full moon in Gemini, this symbolism is generally connected to communication as well as curiosity. It's a very curious sign, right? It's ruled by Mercury. So a full moon in Gemini is going to highlight communication, intellectual exchanges, and also the gathering of information. So it's a time generally with the full moon where, your thoughts and ideas, they kind of come to fruition now. Decisions might need to be made about what has been learned or discussed in the recent past. So you want to go back to what's happened since June of 24 when we had that new moon in Gemini. You can't talk about Gemini without duality, right? Or choices or this or that. Or sometimes with this energy, we feel like there's like a fork in the road. So it can represent, obviously twins, but also themes of duality, choices, sometimes decisions that we have to make, or this feeling of being indecisive and not knowing which path to take. But the full moon can illuminate the need to kind of maybe reconcile different aspects of ourselves and make a choice between multiple paths or ideas and like pick a lane. It's also very much about, social connections, being connected to the element of air as well as Mercury. So things like, networking, interacting with other people, relationship conversations, anything involving communication, learning, or travel. These areas are going to come into focus, and there's going to be much more clarity, hopefully happening around these particular themes. But keep in mind that, the ruler is still retrograde. So there's something outside of ourselves that's still getting worked out. And then the squares to Saturn are saying we're still kind of taking our time and like thinking things through. The strongest aspect, other than the full moon, which is always the sun and the moon in opposition to each other, for me is actually going to be more the square to Neptune. It's a closer square to Neptune than it is to Saturn. So Saturn and Neptune are very different energies. I would say, when you see a square to Neptune, there's always this theme of illusion or reality, right? And am I, should I be saying this? Is it just in my head? Am I seeing things? That kind of stuff happens when we see like squares happening to Neptune. And it introduces almost like a layer of confusion or illusion into, what can usually be very clear, direct, vibes of Gemini. Gemini can communicate pretty well. So there's like a struggle between facts and fantasies where, it seems like clear on the surface, but it might be clouded emotionally, or there might be some like spiritual undercurrents because that's the theme of the moon. The other thing that kind of comes up for me is just with squares to Neptune is like, man, this is just ripe with miscommunications, and then you add that on to a Mercury retrograde. I mean, yeah, it's pretty ripe with miscommunication issues, misunderstandings, deceptive situations. Information is likely not going to be very straightforward, at least not as it appears. And it does require us to use a bit of discernment to sift through what's real and what's not real. And, that's going to be hard to do with a full moon square Neptune. That's also going to be hard to do with Mercury retrograde and the shadow, which is kind of lending its energy all the way until the new year in January. I think of the moon and I think of emotions. And with emotions, or the moon coming into a square with Neptune, there is a possibility that we're feeling a bit emotionally overwhelmed. And the emotional sensitive nature of Neptune might make emotions run high. And then the square from the moon, can bring about themes revolving around feeling overwhelmed, having escapism tendencies, and a need to really kind of balance Gemini's desire for clarity with Pisces' inclination towards empathy and intuition. So you're going to see people on different sides of the spectrum. Some people are going to be like, hey, let's talk about it. Let's hash this out. Let's get it out in the open. And then you're going to have some people that are going to clam up and they're going to be like, I don't want to answer the phone. I don't want to talk. I'm not ready yet, or I'm scared, or I don't know how to kind of address this situation. So we have to be patient. The positive is I think with the conjunction to Jupiter and the fact that, Mercury is retrograde, this is a very internal time. This can allow us to really turn within and ask ourselves, what do I think? What do I want? What have I learned? How can I create better inner dialogue? How can I write things down and kind of come up with an action plan? So on a positive note, it can be incredible for journaling, self-awareness. It can be great for, creative projects. Especially with where imagination meets expression with the squares to Neptune. It's just there's a risk of there being a sense of losing practicality in the process. So it feels a little kind of daydreamy to me with some of the squares to Neptune. Now, Mercury, which is the ruler of this full moon, like I said, it's debilitated. It's in its fallen Sag. Gets kind of lost. It loses all the details and kind of the big plan. And it's retrograde, and we see mutual reception between Mercury and Jupiter. Crazy. You know, to me, it feels like Mercury stationing is a big deal. Something about the full moon emphasizing, hey, there's these details, this story is hitting or something is breaking. And then it's going to be like, wait, but like, what are the facts? Like, are you sure about that? And Mercury is going retrograde. It's about to go direct. It'll go direct later in the day. So for me, this is like a good indication that we're moving from clarity, from confusion to clarity. Okay, so we have clarity after confusion. Because of the connections between Mercury, you know, and the shift with the planet going direct, which kind of symbolizes potential confusion or delay in communication, and then forward momentum. Now, it's not going to happen immediately. It's going to take a couple days for Mercury to wake up. But the focus turns now towards like a broader perspective. It's about truth seeking. It's also about philosophical discussions, legal, you know, kind of headlines, things about like legality and lawsuits might be kind of coming out as well, like big storylines with that. Honest communication. Okay, Mercury, I will give Mercury in Sagittarius credit for that. It's honest communication. Because Sagittarius adds this element of honesty, and it can be blunt sometimes, you know, with Mercury's like communication style, but I feel like the full moon coming in, there's going to be this clear, more direct approach to conversations, and we're focusing on like the bigger picture in a more honest expression of thoughts and feelings. And so that's kind of what's coming up. In the midst of all of that, you know, Mercury's trying the North Node, so we're feeling more bold, kind of dynamic. There is this sense of feeling very courageous and passionate and independent minds, right? And then Mercury is also trining Mars. So Mercury, even though it's like a bit like it's a bit broken down with the retrograde in the fall and the square to Saturn, where it's going to find its way out is going to be within this fire trine. I think it can be positive for travel and education because, you know, Mercury in this sign, it does inspire travel, both literal or metaphorical, through education or expanding our horizons. So it might be a time where, you know, we're kind of under this full moon. Maybe we are really acting upon some of our you know, goals, some of our learning opportunities, some of our travel opportunities in a really enthusiastic way. And we're a little bit more optimistic about exploring some of these new territories. And then Mercury going direct is always about integration of information. So that basically means like there's going to be an emphasis now on integrating what has been kind of dug up during the retrograde, the information that's been gathered. Then the full moon's going to highlight that. It's going to make it definitely broader. There's going to be lots of philosophical insights. And I think it's going to lead to like a synthesis of thought where local ideas meet global and universal concepts. And we're starting to think more globally, right? And we're realizing that in order to, you know, kind of all be on the same page globally, we have to be also reconnecting with our local communities. And that's what Gemini is about. Gemini is about your neighborhood. It's about the small space that you live in, the people that you see every day, the people that you interact with, siblings, neighbors, you know, sometimes friends, things like that. That's all very Gemini. Now, some tips that I'll give you guys for this full moon, because it does have, like I said, some sweet and some salty aspects, is definitely communication. Okay, so with Mercury getting ready to go direct, we want to strive for honesty and clarity in all conversations and communication. This is going to help combat some of the Neptunian fog. All right. Focus on intuition versus reality. All right. So balance your intuition with practicality. Obviously, Neptune's influence can make discernment very challenging. And also take time for reflection. I feel like use this period to reflect on where you might be living in a dream versus in a reality, especially in areas that are highlighted by the house of the full moon where it's falling. So this is going to be in the Gemini area of your chart. And like I said, while this full moon does have some kind of challenging aspects, it gives us the opportunity to clarify, communicate, and ultimately align more closely with our true path as well as our desires. Although there's going to be some initial confusion or idealizing things or some breakdown, we have the better part of the entire month to kind of work through that. Now, I want to take you guys on a past look, and I want to show you where this was seated. Okay, so we see this is the full moon. But if we go back and we look at this as a new moon, this was a new moon on June 6, 2024. Look at that, stellium in Gemini, I remember that. Essentially, this was where we had a Venus cazimi as well. This was pretty fortuitous in that sense. There was a lot of really nice things about this new moon. And I think probably the fact that Venus was in conjunction to the new moon in itself was amazing for love and relationships and communication and like meeting people and, people who work where like writing and education meets like beauty, design, that type of stuff. The problem, and if it wasn't for Saturn, this would have been almost like a perfect new moon. The problem is that the ruler is behind the sun, in my opinion, which means that some of the things we've been thinking about, but we have to kind of ground it out and make it a reality. And this could really be more of like, things sound really good, right? Mercury, Jupiter, it sounds really sweet. It sounds too good to be true. And all of this, especially the new moon, so the moon, sun, and Venus were in a square to Saturn. Okay, so this was already saying there was something that was being seated that was limiting, and maybe it was promoting something, through media that sounded really good, that pushed something up. Okay, I just have to come out and say it, like, mind-boggling to me. This is not me politicking, but absolutely freaking mind-boggling to me that you are now starting to hear that the Harris campaign supposedly knew when she first started running, they knew that even though they kept telling people, oh, it's neck and neck and, she's going to come out, she's going to win and like all this stuff, they knew with the numbers she was not going to win, but they kept taking donations. They kept taking money, right? And I look at this new moon and I go, holy cow, you had a new moon conjunct Venus where this is basically saying the news, the media, the newspapers, magazines, there was going to be lots of conversations and discussion and media revolving around a woman, right? In a position of power, sun conjunct the moon. And the dispositor of this was Venus. Excuse me, not Venus, was Mercury. And Mercury was behind conjunct Jupiter, which means that, somebody, people were probably making money or getting rich in the process, which is like so unfortunate when you think about this, about how much money was raised. Now to find out that, basically the whole, the election's over, the campaign's over, and she's like millions of dollars in debt. And apparently there's also like people who worked for the campaign who like didn't get paid, right? So that sucks when you think about it. But I look at like Mercury conjunct Jupiter, I'm like, well, somebody got paid, somebody made a lot of money, and the money was also being funneled, right? It was being funneled into media. It was like the last several months of the campaign, you'd hear things like all the ad spots that they were buying, all the celebrity endorsements that they were bringing in, really ramping up like campaigns. Like for me, it makes perfect sense that there was a woman that was kind of propped up by the media. And then there was like a lot of like business and also financial exchanges going on in the background, not politicking. It's just the astrology. And then I look at how all of this is squaring Saturn, where it's basically saying like, it sounded really good. Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, in the third house. It sounded really good, sounded really sweet. When in reality, the squares to Saturn was like, that wasn't actually going to fix the problem. It was going to sound good, but it wasn't actually dealing with the problem. It wasn't actually clearing up any of the Saturn in Pisces problems, any of the homeless problems, the medical health issue problems, the psychological problems, the immigration problems, like the list goes on. And so somebody that said all the right things, but ultimately had a failed start, the square to Saturn, with being able to like really kind of get out there. So it's bizarre to me, not bizarre, I mean, I'm not surprised anymore with stuff, but, to look at this now 6 months later, and now this becomes a full moon in Gemini, where we see the ruler square Saturn. And I'm going to be honest with you, this is that moment where like all the normies are waking up and they're like, how long have the news been lying to us? Not funny, but it's like, welcome to the fucking party, guys. Like, glad you're here. Glad you're waking up. And people are going through this process with Mercury retrograde that's like, well, what else are people lying about? What else have they been telling us? I don't know. Sagittarius could be about laws. It could be about racial conflict and divide. It could be also about immigration stuff because it's squaring Saturn. It could be lawsuits that are now starting to happen that are connecting to, you know, big pharma. The oppositions that are taking place to Jupiter and Gemini is like showing you where, you know, depending on what news you're listening to is really going to determine what you believe in and what you align with and what your perspective is. And that could be on a variety of things. It could be sports, finances, politics, you know, it doesn't really matter. Everything is kind of covered under Gemini. Everything is kind of under that umbrella of information. Anyway, so you see this full moon come through where now it's like Mercury square Saturn. Wait a second, like why are there things coming out in other countries or other places? Or why is there news coming out that I'm just now finding out about that does not resonate with what I have always read or what newspaper I buy or what news station I watch? And then you see the moon that's squaring Neptune, where it's going to be like things that are now going to be either kind of blindsiding us that's coming out, where people are going to have an emotional reaction and they're going to be asking questions, so they're going to be confused. Or it's going to be about people being like really sensitive and in their emotions and in their feelings and like not knowing how to process and communicate and talk about stuff. The new moon in Sagittarius, if you guys remember, wasn't all that much different. We saw a lot of the same aspects, and you know, the ruler being in its fall, being retrograde, still squares to Saturn and Neptune. Same thing. So this is just now more people, I think, now starting to ask questions. Anyway, the positive though is that when we saw the new moon in June, we did see that Mercury and Jupiter in the early degrees of Gemini, they were conjunct, which is positive for a new moon. But especially if it's ruled by Mercury, let me go back to it here. But it was trine Pluto. And this is one of those situations where a Pluto trine, I think, manifests more, I'm not going to say negatively, but it definitely does bring up more kind of like, you know, major crisis, conflict, transformation, you know, rather than positive things. Generally, when you think of like trines, you're like, oh, everything's like really good, especially when it's Jupiter trine. But it's almost like information overload, too much information, too much knowledge, you know, global conversations. And the trine to Pluto is about this triggering of this mass awakening. So now that people have started really putting the pieces together over the last 6 months, at first I think it sparked a lot of division and a lot of angry words and people, you know, being kind of like really on their high horse with Mercury conjunct Jupiter. You know, I'm right because of what I read, what I think, what I've been told. And the trine to Pluto is like that conflict that we saw with like friends and family and groups of people. And now we get to this one where we're seeing the opposition in the square. Now, Venus is starting to trine Jupiter. So that could mean some positive things in terms of like, okay, people recognizing or realizing, hey, maybe I was wrong, or you know, I didn't have the facts clearly, or I didn't think this and now I think that. It could smooth over some relationship or friendship or family relations. That is possible. But yeah, I just think about how it was almost like so much information has come out since June that it's like, it's almost hard to deny that. So now as a collective, we're being asked to just totally change and transform something collectively. And also, you know, Pluto transits, usually when they start, because Pluto's just now back in Aquarius, it's going to really bring up the pure form of Pluto in that sign. So Pluto in Aquarius is going to be our collective trauma, our collective fear, our issues revolving around politics, our issues revolving also around technology. All of these things are going to start to kind of come out. And we're definitely feeling that for like the next month or two as planets are coming into conjunction with Pluto. So that's definitely in the sky. In terms of like aspects, just generally, I mean, obviously a full moon, we have it once every like 28 days or so. And this is when the sun and the moon are in opposition to each other. So that is the polarity between these two energies where both of the signs are being kind of highlighted. The action and the dynamic and shining a light in the Sagittarius energy of our chart is really kind of pushing up and highlighting the Gemini area of our chart. We do see that the new moon is conjunct Jupiter, so it can, in that sense, bring more opportunities for positive conversation, learning, traveling, anything revolving around cars, vehicles, you know, moving, your local community, that kind of stuff. And we're also going to see the moon sextile Chiron. So this could be really good for, starting podcasts, talking about healing, coaching, helping other people, work on wounds, maybe being a little bit more active in walking and taking better care of our health by being mobile. Biking can come up here too. And sharing and healing through learning or words or journaling can definitely be like highlighted with that aspect. We're then going to see the sun trine Chiron as well. So this is what we're learning, or the bigger picture revolving around, healing. And, sun and Sag can be kind of putting a highlight on the best teachers, the best professors, the best coaches, the gurus, the teachers, the mentors, who are coming in and like talking about healing and like fixing ourselves, Chiron and Aries. We're going to see, like I said, that square to Neptune, and that's what brings up the confusion, the emotional sensitivity, and not being sure which way things are going to go. We also see that the moon and the sun are loosely squaring the nodes. It's wide. It's about, what is that, like 9 degrees? But you'll see more just after the full moon, as the moon is coming into a square at the north and the south node. And then we're going to see this closer to the winter solstice. The sun will square the nodes, but it's close enough to be like, hey, this is creating a cross in the chart, right? And when planets square the nodes, there is definitely fateful things and events that are kind of happening. The moon can be more about our emotions or home in the past. And as the sun comes through, it can be more about our role out in society and in our careers and responsibility, kind of Capricorn things. But that'll play out after the full moon. We do see Mercury stationing. So like I said, with Mercury stationing, it is really highlighting a need to really pay attention to major changes involving communications, travel, specifically Sagittarius is airplanes. I've been saying over the last week or so, really pay attention. We have some very extreme weather coming. I'm not a weather forecaster. I'm an astrology forecaster, but I've seen some of these mutable squares enough to know, especially with Saturn and Neptune being in Pisces, that these are generally some pretty significant storms. Pisces is wet, okay? Saturn is generally cold. So we can definitely see some very frosty, icy, right, kind of environments in some places, which can have a heavy impact on driving, right? Full moon in Gemini, it's kind of like how many people are trying to commute, or how many people are trying to travel for the holidays, or, trying to drive in and out of spaces where there could be blizzards or heavy water or rain. And also how that's impacting international travel or flying. So it doesn't matter if you're in a car, if you're on a scooter, if you're in an airplane, if you're walking, pay attention, okay? Speaking specifically to that Sabian symbol that's saying you never know where there could be some danger. You're like, everything's fine, I'm having fun, and then you're slipping and sliding all over your driveway. So be safe out there if you're in parts of the world where there's going to be some winter stuff going on, some snow or some ice. We are also going to see that fire trine, like I said, with Mercury trine the North Node and Mars. And this is very much like, I have felt like it's more get up and go energy, but with like the Mercury retrograde, it's kind of saying we have to kind of turn within and like figure out what our purpose or what our plan is and what we believe in. So that way we can take action and begin something new. And Mercury is trine Mars, which is retrograde at this point. So Mars won't turn retrograde until the 6th of December, but that is turned inward as well. So the North Node is retrograde, Mercury is retrograde, Mars is retrograde. It's a lot of like, I want to go somewhere, but how do I get there? What do I do? And reconnecting to Mars and Leo things, old relationships, old hobbies, creative projects, reconnecting with our children, our inner child, that kind of stuff as well. We will see Mercury come into an opposition slightly with Jupiter, which we've actually seen off and on here since the beginning of November, which has been big ideas, things that sound really maybe too good to be true, or there's a sense of like over embellishing things. And this makes information seem bigger, and they're obviously playing off of each other with that mutual reception. So they're both saying the same thing. It's like they're both kind of like blowing certain things out of proportion, or there is something that is breaking down and being worked out. For me, and I've heard this from a lot of clients too, both of these going retrograde, coming into a square with Saturn, is like some people being like, I feel like I'm hitting a wall. there is fog, there is, feeling lethargic, there is moods, there's heaviness, feeling tired. That's definitely coming up with squares to Saturn in Pisces. And, remember, Saturn in Pisces has a connection to our immune system. Where our immune system can be run down, we're drinking, we're drugging, we're not sleeping well, we're depressed, some people are in colder weather, so this could really be triggering between the squares to Saturn and Mars retrograde, being like, some seasonal depressional issues. I cannot speak highly enough of red light therapy. So whether you're in a place where you can go and use like an infrared sauna, or if you want to hop on Amazon and get a red light panel, I really recommend it. If you're somebody who gets impacted by not being able to be in the sunshine or being able to be outside during the winter months, especially with Mars retrograde, some people are going to be feeling like there's going to be some kind of vitality or energy slowing down. And obviously Saturn in Pisces is just like all about focusing on the immune system. So staying warm, but also simultaneously, I think this is going to be about really focusing on, supporting our physical and our mental, emotional health. It's mind, body, spirit stuff. We are going to see Venus is in conjunction to Pluto. She's moving away. So we've kind of gone through that intense conjunction earlier in the month of December, which, obviously themes of Venus and Pluto can be some heavy stuff, some darker, more taboo things in relationships. It can be about betrayal. It can be about situations where relationships are kind of dying off and being reborn. And that's been in conjunction to Ceres as well. So there's definitely some heavy stuff revolving around relationship issues earlier in the month, followed by like a Mars Venus opposition, where it could be talking about, people feeling like they've been betrayed, or like allies or relationships kind of separating or severing. So that kind of comes up in this full moon. And I would just say, like, full moon in Gemini square Neptune makes me feel like everybody's going to have their own perspective. Everybody's going to have their own vision or view of like what happens if a relationship ends, and you ask both partners like what happened. You're going to hear two different stories, right? Rightfully so. That's pretty normal. But the squares to Neptune, I think, are really going to be about like, are people still wanting to identify as like a victim, right? Do you want to identify as a victim? And if you're wanting to identify as a victim with Jupiter and Gemini square Saturn and Neptune, it could mean all of the excuses that we make for why we are the way that we are, or why we're still addicted, or why we're still depressed, or why we're unhealthy, or why, we act or behave the way that we do. I look at this and I could see some people falling into that camp, like being like, I want to blame everybody else. And what's beautiful about Sagittarius season is like all of the planets going through Sag, which are not only opposing Jupiter and squaring Saturn, but they're trining the North Node in Aries, which is about accountability, the self action, and then Chiron, which is about self-healing, and Mars in Leo. Intuitively, I feel like this is like the preparation period. It's almost like the appetizer for going into Saturn and Neptune in Aries, where I'm going to be honest with you, my interpretation of that conjunction that's coming up is going to be like, nobody's going to save you. You have to go and save yourself. And if you want something to happen, you're going to have to do it yourself and pick yourself up by the bootstraps. So you should work with this energy now, with Mercury trying the North Node and Mars. Maybe it's like, I want to learn how to be more productive. I want to, travel more. I want to see the world. I want to learn more, and teach yourself new things. And it could be creative. It could also be physical. It can be about physical health and action and activity. But it could also be about creative hobbies. If you're like, hey, I've always wanted to take a dance class, or I've always wanted to learn how to paint, or I've always wanted to, get on a plane and go to Brazil, whatever. These are things that you might start thinking about doing and taking action now. And I think it could be really wonderful, because this is more about the doers, okay? And the people who are taking accountability and being like, I'm not going to be a victim of these circumstances, or I'm not going to blame other people. Like I'm going to take action and get in the driver's seat. Versus the squares to Saturn and Neptune, which is like, well, this happened to me when I was a kid, or, but they won't talk to me, or, but I'm depressed or whatever. There are going to be excuses that are going to come up as to like why we're not getting to where we want to go. Trust me, guys, Saturn and Neptune, when it leaves Pisces, that's over. Those days are done. You're going to see a whole wave of a ton of life coaches. There's going to be a lot of life coaches that are going to start coming up. You're going to see a lot of people in the fitness world and the health industry that are going to start showing up. You're going to see a lot of people who are going to be really pushing and promoting for accountability and, you know, being more physically active on your own and not feeling like, you know, you're a victim of circumstance. And that's just going to be like a whole thing, because that's really what Aries is about. So that's not everybody's cup of tea, right? We've been in some really heavy Taurus, Capricorn, you know, Pisces territory, which is like, I work, I come home, I eat a pint of ice cream, I go to sleep, you know, but I'm getting my bills paid. Like, those days are long gone. Like, that's not going to be something that is going to be encouraged in the future. So my advice is really leaning into the Mercury North Node Mars trine, and start thinking about what you can do, what you can learn, right? And focus more on action, not just things that sound good, because some things sound really good and we talk about it and we even like make plans and we agree to it. But then at the end of the day, it's like, we're like, oh, I don't feel like it, you know? And that's the Saturn Neptune square. That's like, you know, that lack of accountability or maybe like commitment. And also like where that leads to self-undoing or, you know, mental health issues or isolation. And not actually showing up the way that we want to show up. And then finally, you know, Venus is trine Jupiter. So you're going to see that building right after the full moon. I think it's going to be closer to like the, I want to say like the 17th or the 18th, where Venus will trine Jupiter. And that's big opportunities for love, relationships, and money. Granted, you know, this is an air sign, so it's more about socializing, connecting with, and meeting people. But for certain signs, this will be a good omen for love and relationships. And we've got Mars retrograde now. And now Mars is turning retrograde. And come the beginning of the year, you'll see Mars in its second Pluto opposition. Very similar to what we saw in early November, but it's going to be in a different sign. So that adds a little bit more spice to this, you know. At least Mercury's trine Mars, which is great, but Mars in opposition to Pluto is bringing back that intensity, that polarity, that conflict. It can feel like something is kind of boiling up to the surface in terms of some pressure. And, you know, Mars is connected to the North Node. So it's definitely going to be about where individuals are feeling agitated, angry, upset, reactionary, and the opposition to Pluto is about some of the, you know, personal crisis and what's kind of going on in the collective. You know, my hot take on this is becoming more self-focused with having outlets for that Mars retrograde, physical activity, you know, dating, romance, sex, creativity, things that are going to be feeling more fun. So you can lean into that more or be developing your personal talents or hobbies, so you're not getting wrapped up in like the trauma drama of what's going on in the collective with Pluto and Aquarius. Yeah, heated emotions, people reacting, things getting angry, sure. But Mars and Pluto don't really have anything to do with this new moon, to be honest with you. It's just kind of lingering in the background. Really, the focal point is actually going to be on the full moon and also on Mercury, okay? All right, so with that being said, let me give you guys your predictions for the 12 rising signs. You know, work with the element of air. I would say for this new moon, for this full moon, you know, incense, chimes, bells, writing things down, herbs that are associated with Gemini can be helpful. Stones that are going to be encouraging communication, anything like that. But the truth is that this is a full moon that I would be kind of cautious in what your rituals are, what you're manifesting, or what you're asking for. Because for me, with so many things being retrograde and squared, I think we're waiting for the dust to settle. And we're probably kind of grappling with whatever is kind of coming out around this time for the better part of about 2 weeks or so until we get into ultimately the new moon, which will be in Capricorn. Okay. Now, as always, I am a Western astrologer. That is what I practice, is Western astrology. For the presentation that I'm going to do for you guys today, I always do this in whole sign. So you can listen to your whole sign ascendant reading, and I recommend listening to your ascendant first, as the ascendant is going to tell you quite literally in your life where this is happening. You should also listen to your sun sign and your moon sign, okay? Because the sun sign is going to tell you how it's impacting your overall joy, happiness, maybe even your career, as well as your vitality. And the moon sign is going to help give you insight about your emotions, your home, maybe even your family. All of these things are really helpful in getting like a bigger picture and understanding of what's going on in your life. And as a reminder, this is going to be happening at 23 degrees of Gemini. So if you're a Placidus user like me, you're going to want to look at your chart and see where 23 degrees of Gemini is. So you might have to listen to another rising sign to get the full picture of what's happening with your full moon. All right, so we're going to start as always with Aries and Aries risings. And I'm sure for a lot of you guys, you're like, yes, this is me. So let's take a look at this. So this is going to be a full moon for you guys happening in your third house. And this is the house, obviously, of siblings, communication, travel, that kind of stuff. So in terms of the effects that this is going to have on you, this full moon, you know, communication might be particularly challenging or misrepresented in some way. It's also possible that, you know, relationships with siblings or neighbors, there can be some misunderstandings with people, or, you know, text exchanges, phone calls, or even emails, things that are like you're not really understanding very well, or there's some kind of misunderstanding. I recommend being clear in your communication to avoid any confusion, and that this is a good time to really be reflective when it comes to writing or learning, like taking time to write things down, taking some time to kind of go and listen to a podcast or read a book. That can be really helpful in navigating this full moon. Watch for traveling or challenges or blockages or delays with traveling or things pertaining to documents or cars, okay? All of those things can kind of come up at this time. I predict that there can be some miscommunications, but it might lead to insights or the need for clear expressions about the future, and themes of truth coming up for you in dialogue. Now, Mercury rules this. It's retrograde in your 9th. So legal documents, passports, visas, anything revolving around IDs or passports, that stuff can kind of come up during this particular full moon. And especially things that go missing. So needing it when you need to be somewhere, or suddenly needing to be somewhere, then you're like, where is my ID? Where is my passport? You know, where are my college transcripts? Whatever. Some of those things being harder to kind of find. Card that you get is the Three of Swords. Is it gonna be one of these readings? All right, so the Three of Swords obviously is disappointment. This could be disappointment, feeling heartbroken, feeling also like there's something that needs to be healed. So I'm wondering, like, if you're struggling with, you know, getting closure on a situation, or healing something, you know, talking about it, writing about it, getting something down on paper, seems to be important rather than just kind of holding on to it and like letting it linger. And with the Three of Swords, it can be really referencing the fact that there are some things that you're finally ready to let go of, so you can kind of focus on healing, but you kind of have to get that out of your body or off of your mind in some way. Okay. All right. So we've got Taurus and Taurus rising. What's up, Taurus? You're going to do this full moon in Gemini in your second house of money and income, personal possessions, and self-esteem. Obviously a full moon in the second house is going to be putting an emphasis on financial dealings. Financial matters can be clouded with uncertainty or idealism. That's what you want to watch for. It's possible there could be confusion over what you truly value. My recommendations are double and triple check any financial dealings. Neptune's influence might lead to oversights. Reflect on what you generally value beyond material possessions. And then for predictions, you know, possible financial revelations or the need to reassess your values, and watch for impractical spending or investments. Full moon in your second house can be money in, money out, a larger purchase, something like that, but it is coming into square with Neptune. So it's like, you know, is or are your spending habits actually in alignment with what some of your financial goals are? Do you have some confusion about some of your financial goals? Is there some kind of like decision that you need to make about money? And then the ruler is going to be retrograde in your 8th. So a lot of it is like what you have and what you possess versus what other people give you. For some of you guys, money is coming back to you that's owed to you, or you're reallocating some funds, or maybe you were going to give money to somebody and now you're not, or vice versa. Maybe there's a negotiation that's going on in terms of a financial situation. But it's very financial for both Taurus as well as Scorpio risings. Card that I get is the Seven of Cups. Pretty bang on there. This is about not having clarity, not knowing what the future holds, having too many options or things that are being presented to you right now. I kind of feel like for you, this is being like, well, there's things that I would like to be doing financially, but like, I don't know how to get there, or I don't know how to make that possible, or, you know, I don't know what direction something is going in. And so a lot of this is trying to get you, to like focus on one thing and like not take on too much at one time. Not get overwhelmed with the bigger picture. You know, there might be an idea that you have where you're like, yeah, I want to invest in this thing with the second house full moon, but is it actually going to help you make money? And is the way that you're going to go about making this investment or spending this money, are you sure that it's going to be able to come back to you the way that you think it is? So there's still some issues that need to get worked out in terms of clarity. And I would say that's likely going to come the later that you get into December, early into the new year. All right, we've got Gemini and Gemini rising. What's up, Gemini? This is your full moon, so enjoy it. Obviously, when you have a full moon in the first house of self, this is all about your body. This is about your identity. This is about who you are as a person. So, you know, full moons in the first house, I mean, it's not a bad thing. It can be some major completion that's going on for you. There's much more of a focus and emphasis on your needs, what you want, how you feel, okay? That's just what happens in the first house. Yes, you can be more emotional, you can be more sensitive with the full moon here. And obviously it's also conjunct Jupiter. So it can be bringing you lots of like opportunity to have more visibility at work. You might be more happy or more kind of like excited about the future when it comes to your career, your long-term goals. The challenge is that, you know, with the squares to Neptune and the oppositions to the sun in the 7th and your chart ruler Mercury in retrograde in the 7th, there's a lot of other moving pieces. I feel like your sense of identity might feel like a little split or confused right now. So there's like one side of you that's like really pushed to present yourself in a new light or make decisions about your personal image, versus the other side of you that's just like, well, you know, I don't know, or I'm having to consult with other people before I make that change, or if I make these changes, how is it going to impact my relationships? I would encourage you to embrace duality within you and be wary of any self-deception. Clarify your intentions before making any big changes to your appearance or your personal brand. And you might find yourself at a crossroads regarding personal expression, and themes of authenticity versus illusion can be very prominent, where you're like, this is who I am at home by myself and on the weekends, but this is who I am at work. And like, how do I find ways to kind of reconcile these two different people? And then obviously, you know, Mercury rules your chart, but it also rules this moon. So it's retrograde in your 7th. So it's like, you know, you might feel like the more you're focusing on yourself and you're being kind of like an authority in your own life, like it's causing like some rifts with other people, with like romantic partners, spouses, clients, you know, people like that. As Mercury is turning retrograde in your 7th, you're changing, and in turn, your relationship with others are changing, or you're reacting to the fact that there's so many changes going on in relationships that you're like, I need to focus on me, right? And all of this squares Saturn and Neptune. So there's these big question marks about, well, how does that impact my status or my career or my relationships with other people? Just take a breath, focus on yourself right now. And I think that with, you know, Mercury sextile Pluto, Mercury sextile Venus, some of you guys are kind of learning that, you know, traveling can help, learning can help, you know, kind of figuring out the bigger picture, connecting with a teacher or a mentor, that can be like a way out. Okay. All right. Enjoy that moon. We've got Cancer and Cancer rising. You've got a full moon in your 12th house in Gemini. Obviously, you guys are ruled by the moon. So the moon is, oh, Gemini, hi, you want your card? Sorry. Sorry, Cancer, hold on. This is going to be for Gemini. I almost didn't give it to you guys. All right, the card that you get is the Ace of Cups. So just kind of going back to that really quick, Gemini. Thank God for this card. I feel like the Mercury retrograde is helping you get to the bottom of situations and relationships with other people, so you can focus on what you do want, or how to have more meaning or connection in relationships, or like, you know, a deeper spiritual connection. Ace can be a new beginning, so it can also mean new relationships are coming in and you're having a better relationship with yourself. There, in turn, you're bringing somebody new into your life, or you're focusing more on developing these relationships and having more love and having more like security and affection. So this is really good for you. All right, sorry about that. All right, so we have Cancer and Cancer rising. So you guys obviously are ruled by the moon. So having a full moon take place in your sign tells me that really what this is about is, taking place in your 12th house. What it tells me is that you guys are really focusing on like turning within. So the 12th house can be what is hidden. It could be more kind of subconscious. This is more about resting, recuperating, healing. This could also mean that there are some big spiritual shifts happening, or maybe you're releasing things or healing things or letting things go behind the scenes. Usually, a full moon in this 12th house, like the transit can definitely stir up some stuff subconsciously that you were not aware that was kind of hanging out there. There could be a lot of internal dialogue or confusion about solitude versus your needs socially. I would recommend using this time for introspection or healing, but avoid escapism, because that can come up here too. Eating, drinking, oversleeping, bad habits, they can all kind of come up. Opt for meditation or spiritual practices, or being alone in nature, or going for long walks by yourself, or, going to see a healer or a therapist. That's generally what you want to see when you have the ruler in, connected to the 12th in the 6th. It wants you to have healthier habits, right? And Mercury's already retrograde there. So some of you guys are like trying to better your daily routine, how you're working out, how you're eating, how you're treating your body, because you want better mental, emotional, or sleep, I think, like results from some of these changes. You got to be careful with the 6th and the 12th house, because if there is some health related issues, it could mean that you need time down, or that you're having to go and see a practitioner, or you're doing a stay in a hospital, obviously touch wood, or you're receiving some kind of treatment, or you're healing. And the ruler at the time is in the 6th. So it could literally, pull you out of work because you're having to heal something. Or you might have to change something about your health or your routine so that way you can heal something. So that definitely comes up for you guys. I would just say focus on, for the predictions that I'm giving you, that this is going to be a time that's about releasing old patterns or old illusions. And this could lead to major spiritual or psychological growth through a start of like a sense of emotional overwhelm. So you're like overwhelmed about something. You're like, I can't do this anymore. And you're like, okay, I need to really focus on getting clarity, having healthier habits and patterns, and like supporting my emotional or my mental health and getting rest. That seems to be very important. This opposition is squared by Saturn. So for a lot of you guys, like you need a teacher, or you need a guru, or you need a mentor, or you need a program. Like there's something that you're going to be learning or doing that can kind of help you navigate some of the healing at this time. And for a lot of you guys, it can also be like Eastern practices or modalities like acupuncture. It could be about Tai Chi. It could be about energy healing. Anything that is going to be kind of connecting the mind, body, spirit in that sort of way. Okay. Let's see what card you guys get. You get the 5 of Wands. So there's this feeling of like, 5 of Wands is like a combative energy. For me, it's kind of draining because you feel like you're getting it from all different angles. So it can be saying that at the time of the full moon, like you really do need to rest and kind of remove yourself from any drama or conflict. This could be with work, issues, or with coworkers, or in regards to your schedule or your workplace. It can also mean that you're taking time and you're just like unplugging, and you're not wanting to communicate or talk to people about their issues or their feelings, and like you need space away from others, where maybe you're putting the phone down, or maybe you're putting it on airplane mode or something like that to kind of give yourself a little bit of time off to rest. Okay. All right. So we have got Leo and Leo rising. You guys are going to be doing the full moon in Gemini in your natal 11th house. This is a fun place to have a full moon. Friends, hopes, dreams, parties, socializing, gatherings, get-togethers, kind of coming together with collective minds. This is the emphasis on the full moon here. It will be obviously in opposition to its ruler, and it'll be kind of squaring Neptune and Saturn. So I would say the effects of this, social circles might be a source of both inspiration or confusion. Dreams for the future could be overly optimistic, but that's not a bad thing. I would encourage you to engage with groups of people who support your true aspirations, not just the appealing ones, and clarify your visions for the future. Friends might evolve, with some becoming more meaningful and others revealing their true nature to you. And I would say that because the moon Jupiter can be about really positive kind of connections with people who have come in to kind of support you and like where you're going. But the squares to Neptune and also Saturn indicate that some people might be like two-faced, or there are some people coming up that you're realizing like are not your people. The ruler is retrograde in your 5th, where you're more focused on your own creative sense of self and your happiness or your hobbies or your love life or your children. And that's kind of like you going like, okay, I'm prioritizing these things more. I'm going to have the full moon that's going to be in the 11th, and I'm only going to be around people who are also simultaneously going to make me happy and encourage me to grow, people who are going to be positive for me to be around, people that I enjoy and that we have something in common. With the squares to Saturn, I would just say, you know, be cautious and be careful about like situationships and like where, you know, relationships with people are undefined, especially if there's like a romantic kind of connection to somebody who you're friends with. The opposition to the 5th and the square to Saturn can mean that, you know, there are some people who are better off as friends and not complicating things and kind of having something undefined. This can also be showing you where there can be some stuff going on in the lives of your friends, or, you know, involving their children or who they're dating. And they can be going back and forth with you and kind of sharing information with you about what they're going through and wanting to kind of connect with you again. So if they've had a change in their relationship status, or, you know, maybe they now have a kid that's going off to college or something like that, there could be much more togetherness that could be happening here. The card that I got for you is the 6 of Cups. Reconnection, I like that. Reminiscing, reconnection, innocent, you know, playtime, sweetness. It can be an indication that there's a significant emotional connection with somebody that's coming in. So it can be romantic. For some tarot readers, I see that as like the soulmate card, but it can be about reconnecting with people. So it's funny, like, you know, Mercury is connected to your 11th, it's retrograde in your 5th. Like if you're meant to reconnect with somebody who you're really in love with, yes, it could happen through a friend or through social media maybe. But I think it's also about connecting with people who you feel like you can be yourself with, and that you can have fun with and you can connect with. And it's like a nice kind of energy to be around, and that it encourages you to kind of be like youthful and authentic and like yourself, and like you feel good about the connection. You know, in the background, like Venus going into conjunction with Pluto in your 7th, some of the trines to Jupiter. You know, if you guys are single, get out and mingle. That's going to open the door to make it more likely that you're going to meet somebody with this full moon. Simultaneously, you could have friends that want to be more than friends, or friends that want to introduce you to somebody or set you up. I could see that happening for you guys as well. Okay. So hopefully that's helpful for you guys. We've got Virgo and Virgo rising. You guys are going to be experiencing a full moon in Gemini in your natal 10th house. So for you, Virgo, you're the one who's really feeling this. You've got a full moon in your 10th house squaring your sign. It's also squaring Saturn and Neptune in your house of relationships, and it's opposing the sun, and also Mercury kind of retrograde in your 4th. So how are my Virgo risings doing? Life seems a little lit right now with some of your guys' charts. In a nutshell, you know, your 10th house is your career, your public image. It's also about your professional life and like how people see you out in the world. So a full moon in the 10th house definitely has an impact on your career. Quitting jobs, changing jobs, getting, you know, promoted, you know, some kind of significant change in your status. These things generally happen when you have a full moon in your 10th house. But this full moon, you might feel like your career path is unclear, or your public image could be misconstrued due to Neptune's influence. I recommend defining your career goals with clarity post Mercury direct. Okay, so after it goes direct after the 15th. To cut through any confusion, you know, be authentic in your public endeavors. I am predicting potential for career breakthroughs if you can navigate through the fog of, you know, misunderstanding or confusion. At the time of this particular full moon, the ruler, which is also your ruler, is in the 4th house, which tells me that there's much more focus and emphasis on home, family, where you're living, maybe moving, maybe there is a big change going on with your private life and it's impacting your career. Maybe you're moving for a job or relocating. Maybe there is some change going on with your home and your family, and you're focusing more on what's going on at home versus being at work, right? So you're feeling the push and the pull of the 4th house and the 10th house and going back and forth. And it's all being featured by a square to Saturn and Neptune, where Some of you guys are like, I'm looking for a partner to support me in this, or I need my partner to show up more, or I need a therapist, or, somebody who can kind of help me navigate the direction that I'm going with my professional life and also my home. This will pass. Things are going to ease up a little bit as we're getting closer to January. I would just say for right now, with the ruler being in the 4th house, it almost seems like something about your private life is becoming public. And so for some of you guys, it could be like, we got married, or we just bought a house, or we just had a baby, or like, I'm now, starting a business with my family. Like, these things could become more prominent. And yeah, you just got to hang in there, because I think that some of the oppositions and the squares can feel difficult. And a lot of Virgo risings are seeking clarity, direction, or support from their partnerships in some way. And if you don't have a partnership, that's okay. You might be feeling that lack of like, oh, I wish I could have somebody to support me at this time. I need more from another person. So it may prompt or promote you to actually want to change something about your relationship status. But it's generally pretty good for your career. Jupiter and Saturn are kind of in a landlock again in December. So it's not likely that you're going to feel 100% pleased with your committed relationships or your romantic life and your career. It will pass. It's just Saturn and Jupiter have to square one last time, and then it's going to kind of ease up. Okay, so what can you be reworking or rechanging about your emotions, your home, your family, or the past to help you focus more on where you're going in your future, right? That's the real question. Card that I got for you is the Knight of Coins. So this is actually you, Virgo. And this could be saying that you're proceeding forward and making decisions cautiously, and you're kind of strategizing and you're planning this out. This could be about a move, right? This could be about a financial shift. This could also be about an offer, some kind of news about money or resources coming your way. It is possible, with this being in your 10th house, that there could be news of a promotion or a better paying job or a better opportunity or something that's coming your way, but you're being really cautious about it, as you should be, right? And you're not like rushing into a situation. You're going to choose what's going to ultimately be best for you. And I think in your case, not just financially, but also for you emotionally and within your home. Okay. Good luck. We've got Libra and Libra rising. What's up, Libra? You're going to be doing a full moon in the sign of Gemini. This is going to be taking place in a fellow sister air sign. So if you're a Libra placement, 23, 24, 25, I'd say 22 to 25 degrees, it'll be trining your sun, moon, and rising. So it'll be pretty friendly for you, okay? Full moon in the 9th house is bringing the topics of travel, education, law, legality, philosophy, traveling. All that stuff is kind of coming up for you now here. And a full moon does impact travel plans in the 9th house. It could be things like you're buying tickets, you're going on a trip, you're having to, do some research into going somewhere. Something like that usually happens. Sometimes you're at an airport, But the challenge with this particular full moon is that it is going to feature a debilitated Mercury, and it is going to square Neptune, and then the ruler is squaring Saturn. So we see both of these things. Travel plans or educational pursuits can be clouded by idealism or impracticality, and also your philosophical beliefs might be challenged. Delays with travel due to health or pets, challenges revolving around lawsuits or settlements can happen here as well. And you got to take care of your health and your habits to make sure that you're capable of being able to be running around traveling and doing stuff with those squares to your 6th house. I think that I would focus on, seeking truth in your studies or your travel, but be cautious by being led astray by things that are beautiful or impractical. I also think that, opportunities for expanding your worldview are very possible right now with a full moon in the 9th. But you may encounter some information or something that you have to be a little bit more cautious or critical of, especially if it's like regarding health, work habits, even like some kind of traveling for training. You got to be more cautious about that stuff. And obviously the retrograde is taking place. The ruler is retrograde in your 3rd. So you're going back and reevaluating something you've read or something you've learned or somewhere you've traveled. This is also a time where you might be reconsidering something about education, or going back and reworking some documents or something you've written, or something legal, right? So that could be kind of coming up here as well. I think delays are the big theme for Libra rising with squares to Saturn. Delays with work, delays with traveling, delays with something that you're learning. So just be patient. And I think the positive is that, you have a full moon conjunct Jupiter and it's in your 9th house. So ultimately there is room for learning, expanding, traveling, doing this stuff, but you have to kind of go and either do your research and kind of figure things out and plan things accordingly. And if there's any travel plans that kind of come up that are delayed in some way in December, it's not surprising if that does happen. Okay. All right. So let's see what card you get, Libra. The card that you get is the Emperor, which is interesting. This is about Mars. This is also about Aries. So Mars obviously is connected to Aries, and it rules your 7th. So I could see this as like, Mars going retrograde into your 10th. Some Libras and Libra risings are reevaluating or reconsidering work, or they're wanting to slow down, or they're wanting to retire, or they want to change something about their career direction. And maybe with Jupiter square Saturn, it's kind of saying like you're wanting to learn something new or learn new skills. You're wanting to travel more. And it's about actually acknowledging that something is going to be slowing down in your professional life, or something is changing in regards to your relationships with another person. It could be professional relationships, romantic relationships, and that's kind of playing a role in what's changing. But the Emperor is about handling the situation like a boss, right? And so I think that a lot of, like, for me, just being a Libra rising, the Saturn squares, it's been about better delegating time or tasks to certain things. And if there's something that I want to do or somewhere that I want to go, it's about kind of working with Saturn in the 6th house and like the time management to make these things possible. Okay. All right, Libra, I'll see you next month. All right, so we have Scorpio and Scorpio rising. What's up, Scorpio? You're doing a full moon in Gemini. This is taking place in your 8th house, a house that you're familiar with. All about shared resources, transformation, intimacy, taxes, rebirth energy, things revolving around joint resources as well. So when you have a full moon in the 8th house, okay, so you and Taurus is pretty financial. The 8th house is about like money that you have collectively with other people. So money in the bank, investments, money you have with a partner, child support, spousal support, inheritances, and stuff like that, tax stuff. So when you have a full moon here, especially with the aspects, okay, it's going to be obviously the ruler is in the 2nd, and we see squares to both Saturn and Neptune in the 5th. It basically means that, for you, there could be issues around shared finances that are coming up. Intimacy issues can be coming up that are kind of confusing. Psychological transformation is likely to be on the horizon, especially with Jupiter in the 8th house conjunct this full moon. I would just say be super cautious and conservative maybe with shared resources. Ensure all agreements are clear, embrace the transformation within joint resources, and the potential that, investments and joining together with another person can bring you, but be grounded about what can or cannot be possible. I predict that there could be deeper psychological or financial themes that are kind of coming up. It may start with a little bit of confusion or denial, but it will evolve into having more clarity about what your goals are. Now, the ruler is retrograde in your 2nd house, which means you're reevaluating, how am I making money? What's mine? What's someone else's? Am I growing with another person or not? And obviously the squares to both Neptune and Saturn can talk about whether or not you're on the same page with another person in terms of romance and intimacy, whether or not you're on the same page with another person when it comes to like investments. Also, if you're not in a relationship or it's not financially related, it could be more you going like, okay, how can I find more time or more resources to do the things that I love? Saturn in the 5th house could be creative projects. It could be your own business. And whether or not you feel like you're making enough money doing something that you're kind of doing independently if you own your own business. So definitely a lot of kind of reevaluating your values and what you do when you don't have, and how to figure out how to have access to more. Now, truth be told, I've seen 8th house full moons where, people have a sudden lump sum that comes in out of the blue they didn't see, or their partner ends up coming into some money, or something's given to them, or they get a refund, or a bonus of some kind. But I've also seen payments have to go out and things having to be paid and a lot of money out. So there's a lot of money in and a lot of money out this month, I think, with the retrograde and the full moon. I would just say be cautious of your spending with Mercury turning retrograde in the 2nd house, because there can be a sense of wanting to spend less money, and then you could find that there's some joint expenses or some unexpected spending that's going on, which obviously could be a little challenging. With the squares to Saturn, it could be expenses revolving around children, expenses revolving around like creative projects. But also Saturn in the 5th is like, spending money on experiences, going to theaters, going to shows, going to casinos, bars, clubs, things like that. And whether or not those things are actually bringing you joy, or if you're spending money on things that you're not actually really enjoying and you're having to reassess your values. Okay. All right. So let's see what card you get, Scorpio. You get the Knight of Swords, which is interesting because obviously the full moon's in Gemini. So it looks like there could be some message coming revolving around joint resources. And Mercury, which is generally associated with the Knight of Swords, could be that you're getting ready to relay some information to someone or tell somebody about what you want, or maybe there's a negotiation going on between you and another person. And the squares to Saturn make me wonder, is it over property, home, children, some kind of creative endeavor, and going back and forth about taking a chance on something. And if you're on the same page as another person, phone calls, emails, text messages, contracts, things like that. Usually news comes very swiftly with the Knight of Swords. So watch for these conversations about some of these topics in your 8th house. It could even be like you get something in the mail that's about an investment, or something that's being returned to you. Maybe you get an email or a text message about somebody wanting to pay you back or something. Hey, I want to connect with you. And you're like, what do they want? And then you realize like, oh, they owe you some money, or they're contacting you because they want to give you a refund for something. Look for those things. Okay. All right. We've got Sag and Sag rising. What's up, Sag? How you doing? Hanging in there, I hope, with that retrograde. So you're going to be having a full moon in Gemini. This will be happening in your opposite sign, in your 7th house of others. And obviously this is that time of the year where there is just going to be much more of an emphasis on what's going on with your relationship to other people. So a full moon in the 7th house is bringing your attention to major, conclusions, completions, anything revolving around others. The effects of this full moon, keep in mind that the ruler is retrograde in your sign. So you're kind of going through how to reconfigure how to talk, communicate, and connect with people, be that yourself or with others. And it is also featuring a square to Neptune. Okay. So this is lit. That makes like Saturn and Neptune the focal point, basically, even though the full moon is in your 7th of others, it's all feeding off of the 4th house. So things that are coming up in relationships that are being affected by your mood, your home, your family, your living situation, and changes in directions in how you're communicating. The effects is like relationships right now can feel like you're moving or navigating through fog. There could be some tension between clear communication and shared dreams, especially when it comes to the future of your home or your living situation. I would be honest with your partners, even if that means facing uncomfortable truths, that this is a time to redefine, your relational boundaries with other people. You yourself might be changing direction in how you communicate and connect with people. You might be changing your mind on your relationships or your communication strategy with Mercury retrograde. I would also say that it's possible that there could be major, conversations that could be very transformative in relationships, and you guys are focusing on what's real rather than like what's been fantasized. And so this is complicated because I feel like right now the way that you communicate or see yourself is changing, and so other people might be reacting or responding to that. And asking you like, what is it you want, or where is this going, or, what are we doing with our home or our living situation, because it's all squaring Neptune. And it looks to me like the home or the living situation is still not defined, or maybe there's still something changing, or there's some kind of change of circumstances in, maybe how or where you're going to be living. And that's going to definitely play a role in a lot of this. With Mercury retrograde in your first, I would say, if you need some time away from someone or you need some space, it's okay to ask for it, but find ways to communicate effectively, and realize that a lot of what's coming up might not be as focused on relationships as it is, your reaction to things that are going on at home or with your family, or home or housing related issues. And the 7th house isn't just romantic relationships. Like, some people who are single can meet somebody under this full moon, but other people might say, well, I need to have a conversation with my sister, right? Gemini siblings, or I need to talk to my neighbor, or I need to, find a therapist or reconnect with my therapist. Something like that might be going on right now as well, where you feel like you need some help outside of your normal kind of relationships. You might feel like you need another person to help guide you. All right, so let's take a look. Let's see what the cards say. Ooh, I love this for you, Ace of Swords. This is such a good card for Sagittarius because it's like really telling you, like, take your sword and like wield it, like tell people what's up, which is not something that you guys generally have a problem doing. But I feel like the Ace of Swords is about truth, and it's about information, and it's about knowledge and knowing how to kind of come out with it. So this might be a time where, where you feel like you're typically not as willing to have conversations with romantic partners about things that are private. Now you are, where you're less likely to ask somebody for help. Now you're asking for help. Where you're less likely to tell somebody how you feel. Now you're willing to do that. And the Ace of Swords is always about new opportunities and new beginnings when it comes to expressing yourself and like getting the point across and like being direct with the information and initiating new contracts, negotiations, learning something new. So I think you're learning something new about yourself, and you're doing that through your relationship with other people and realizing you don't have to do it by yourself. Okay? Enjoy, Sag. I hope all the single Sag risings meet somebody. I hope it's a good one for you guys. All right, we've got Capricorn and Capricorn rising. You guys are going to experience a full moon in Gemini in your natal 6th house. And this is all about health, habits, and your routines daily. Sometimes it's about your workspace, or it can be about pets as well. And a full moon in the 6th house, it's definitely putting an emphasis on, work. But remember, this is going to be square Neptune. So there's some clarity issues. And you've got Mercury square Saturn, which impacts you, especially in terms of like your mental health, or if you're feeling like you're under the weather, or you're feeling like a little squirrely, like you kind of want to be by yourself right now with that retrograde in your 12th house. But this full moon in your 6th makes me feel like, there might be some stuff coming up revolving around work where there's miscommunications or there's some confusion. Your health can be impacted by stress or lack of clear boundaries. So you got to watch out for that with the square to Neptune. I would establish clear routines to combat Neptune's energy, and health practices should be both practical and intuitive. So I kind of feel like the practical daily routines is the 6th house. Are you eating your vegetables, working out? Are you making time, for rest and recuperation? But the ruler is in the 12th house, which is like saying like you have to be careful here at this retrograde. Bad habits can be coming up. Health problems can be coming up if you're not sticking to a routine. It wants you to maintain a routine. And I think that square to Saturn and Neptune is like listening to a self-help podcast, going for a walk, going for a bike ride, journaling, things that are more Pisces things, more sensitive and emotional. It's not always like grinding it out at the gym. I do think that I would work on projects that require reevaluation with the full moon in the 6th house. Health might benefit from a holistic approach, but clarity in your daily habits is crucial. And the retrograde Mercury, which is in the ruler in the 12th, is rest and sleep, healing. It can be about being in, private spaces and places where you can meditate and kind of relax, or go to spas or other things where you have time to decompress, because that's squaring Saturn. 6th house full moon, something going on where you're changing offices, changing jobs. You get some health results. If something comes up health-wise, obviously touch wood. The ruler in the 12th house means that you're gaining clarity and you're getting insight as to what's going on. I would just say pay attention to your physical health and your mental health. And for a lot of you guys that have been really prioritizing changes in your physical health or your mental health, you know, this can be a time where you're starting to see the results in the 6th house. It's like, oh, I'm on a routine, I'm eating well, I'm feeling better, you know, health has improved. But a lot of this is not just going to be with your routines. It's also going to be about mental health because of the squares to the 3rd house. Okay. Watch for changes with schedule that can happen there as well. Changes sometimes with coworkers or employees that can kind of happen there also. And for those of you guys who have been looking for work, it can definitely be a time where there can be a change with work, or maybe you're picking up something that is flexible, or yeah, it's got like a flexible schedule. The card that I get is the 5 of Wands. It's 2 of you guys. Doesn't really surprise me with some of the squares to Saturn, and you being Saturn ruled, where you're like, oh my gosh, I've got so many things coming at me from different angles. You know, you're like, I'd rather be resting and kind of recuperating, but I got to show up. I have places to be, or I'm moving, or I have to be having conversations with people, and simultaneously like working. But the 5 of Wands talks about where we're feeling like we're kind of getting like beat down a little bit, or it's overwhelming, or it's kind of like combative energy. So I would say a lot of this is going to be about how you're communicating with people, either at work or with employees, or how you're kind of expressing some of your issues or concerns with people, like in terms of your healthcare. And it really wants you to speak up, to not like hold on to conversations and not have them, or not like request more information or feedback. I think it's important that you're definitely communicating or kind of expressing any of your concerns. Okay. And take care of yourself, you know, rest. If you're sick or if you're feeling under the weather at that retrograde, you need to rest. Otherwise, you know, you can have this full moon and then suddenly there is a health issue, and then you're like, well, now I have to stay down. You know, you don't want to work to the point where you're overdoing it. Good luck, Capricorn. We have Aquarius and Aquarius rising. Aquarius, you're going to be doing this full moon in Gemini, in a fellow sister air sign, in your natal 5th house. What a beautiful full moon here for you. So the 5th house deals with creativity. It's about romance and dating. If you're just kind of meeting somebody or you're trying to, it can be about children or pregnancy. It can also be about big changes going on in the life of your children, or big changes revolving around your creativity and how you express yourself. Now, truth be told, like a full moon in the 5th house conjunct Jupiter can definitely be very fortuitous for you, both because Jupiter is about money, and also this can be about your own personal possessions and joy. So good news coming to you about investments, good news involving romantic partners, good news revolving around children. It's pretty positive for the most part. However, there are some squares to Neptune as well as to Saturn, and Saturn is your chart ruler traditionally, okay? So it's almost like, you know, good things are expanding and happening, or I'm having fun, or I'm dating, or, you know, the good things are going on with my kids, but, you know, it's costing me some money, or it's costing me some time, or, you know, I'm having to work a little bit harder to grow my own personal business, like something like that. So there's both expansion and contraction there. And I think that, you know, for me, this is about your creative expression or your romantic relationships. You know, they could be colored by fantasy or unrealistic expectations. So you want to be careful with that. I would be channeling your creativity into forms that allow for exploration of illusions versus reality. Water painting, dancing, photography, like that kind of stuff can be really good for you. And watch out for idealizing partners in romantic relationships that can come up. And I predict that this is a period where love and creativity might be inspiring, but also challenging to kind of ground. Like there can be this feeling of like, you know, do I want to be creative and having fun, or do I want to be structured? And you're going to go back and forth between the two. The ruler of this full moon is Mercury, because it's in Gemini and it's in your 11th house. So this means that there's something like you're creatively sharing with a group of people. It's like if you make crafts, you take it to a craft fair, you know, or maybe your kid is having a birthday party, and so you invite a bunch of people over. That's like the 11th house. So something about what you create or what you're enjoying or what you love and sharing that with other people. Well, Mercury is retrograde, so you might be, you know, reconnecting with friends after having a baby. You might be sharing some kind of news with friends about some new business or some new hobby. Obviously, that's also square Saturn. So there is this sense of being like, well, any which way you slice it, it's going to cost me some time or it's going to cost me some money, or some investment of some kind. But if it's what I really love, right, full moon with Jupiter in the 5th, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I would just say this is about having fun in a way that's like, conservative, and you're not like breaking the bank, right? Or you're not overdoing it. Certainly Jupiter in the 5th house, we can overdrink, overparty, over celebrate. We can overdo a lot of things. And I like the fact that it's conjunct Jupiter because it says that it can be something that brings you a lot of joy, even if it costs you some time or some energy or some money. It might be worth investing in some of these things. And I would say go back and look at what happened, 6 months ago, where you were like, I want more of this, whatever it is, more romance, more dates, more fun, more creativity. I want to have children. I mean, certainly having a full moon in your 5th house can be a time where there's like a realization of a pregnancy, but conjunct Jupiter, definitely. But there may be this back and forth between being like, what is it going to cost? Is it going to be costly, right? That could be something else, especially if those of you guys who already have a kid, your second child is your 7th house. And so Mars going retrograde could be like you going back and forth with a partner being like, do we have another one? Is that something that we want to do? Anyway, just some food for thought. So let's see. Look forward to the fun, the opportunities for romance. Just be cautious and be, aware of what you can and cannot take on. The card that I get is the 9 of Swords. So this is a card that can be talking about like disappointment or concerns or worry. So it can be worrying over things that you have no control over. So in the 5th house is like, is it going to work out in this relationship? Is my business going to be successful? What if they don't like me? What if I don't make the money? What if things don't go through? But I would say you're worrying about things you have no control over. And I think that this is also a very, very positive full moon. And maybe the square with Saturn is about you kind of like preparing yourself or telling yourself like, don't get too excited, don't get too happy, don't get too attached. When in reality, I would say like, it's okay for you to be cautious, but don't like psych yourself out and not allow yourself to believe that some of these things can actually really grow and develop, because they can. And that could be anything, finance, relationships, anything in regards to self-employment, creativity. You're going to get hit a little bit in December with the Jupiter-Saturn square, and then this is going to start to expand. But I would focus more on not what if it doesn't work out, or what if this doesn't, if this isn't successful. It's like, what if it is? What if I do meet somebody? What if it is like the greatest, relationship ever? What do I do then? Focus more on the positives rather than the negatives, because worrying about things that you have no control over, you don't know what's coming, it's kind of a waste of time, right? You're going to psych yourself out. All right, hope that's helpful, Aquarius. And we've got Pisces and Pisces rising. What's up, Pisces? You'll be doing a full moon in Gemini in your 4th house. This will be squaring your sign, especially if you're like 22 to 24 degrees. And a full moon in the 4th house, well, the moon's at home here. It likes being in the 4th house. It feels like it's homey. So a full moon in the 4th house brings your attention to your home and your family, things revolving around your apartment, your mortgage, your parents, your roommates, the past, even all that stuff. So when we have a full moon, the effects is things like buying and selling homes, completing homes, going home, family coming to visit you, big completions and endings. The 4th house is the house of endings. Little tricky because you've got the moon that's square Neptune in your sign. You've got the ruler in your 10th house of career square Saturn. So it's almost like Saturn and Neptune in your 1st house is causing a lot of ruckus between your 4th and your 10th. On one hand, you're reevaluating your career and your status up here. On the other hand, your attention's being brought to your home and your living situation, and that may potentially be coming to some close or completion, but you're like, I don't know if I'm totally satisfied, because it's going to square Saturn and Neptune in your sign. This is just like a continuation of like what you've been dealing with, I think, since June, where there's been this whole, I want to move, do I want to move, do I not want to move thing, or I'm going between 2 places, or I'm expanding one home, or I'm selling something, or I'm relocating, or I'm going back home, or I don't know where I want to live. I've heard a lot of those stories from you guys because of the mutable squares. I would say that your home life, while there's something kind of coming to some kind of conclusion here, it can still feel like you're confused or you're challenged when it comes to figuring out where home is. And you might be feeling a little confused where you truly belong or where you feel at peace. I recommend making this all about creating a sanctuary at home where you can kind of retreat and find clarity. Family discussions might need a softer, more empathetic approach. And I'm predicting that emotional clarity might emerge from family interactions. Initially, there could be some confusion or some challenges or idealizing certain situations, but the more that you're working through that stuff, the more that you're going to realize what you do want. Like the other mutable signs, I feel like it's going to take you until the end of December, going into January to kind of figure this out. I think you're trying to sort out some of your career or your status stuff first, and that's having a big impact on where you're living or where your home is going to be. And once you've sorted some of that stuff out, it's going to be easier for you to navigate and make some of these moves. Intuitively, with Jupiter square Saturn also brewing, I feel like this is not a good month to move. This might be a month where you realize I don't want to be here anymore, or something needs to change, or I need to renovate, or I need to go back home. But moving under the Jupiter Saturn square in December is likely not going to go as smoothly. So I'd say maybe try to wait a little bit. Jupiter will go direct in February, so that could be a better time for you to be making some moves if that's something that you need to do. And really pay attention to your home, your family, and your emotions at this time. But something about your work and your career is impacting your home. And this could be parenting things, like your parents or your relationship with your kids if you are a parent, and a back and forth thing revolving around your parents. Card that I get is the Three of Coins. So this is good. This is about team effort, working together, working through something, and being able to kind of produce something that can be, I think, really beneficial. For some of you guys, you're taking a step away from work because you want to focus more on being at home, or you want to be with family, or maybe you're switching jobs or you're retiring. For others, it could mean that, you're looking for a job at another location and you're relocating. It really depends, but I would say that the Three of Coins means that you're working on something with another person. You have some support from other people. Maybe the support is coming from, people in your professional world saying, hey, we understand if you got to, be with family right now, if you got to go home, you got to take some time, or maybe you're taking time off. Some of you guys are taking time off to move, or some of you guys are going on maternity leave, You got Jupiter going into your 5th house next year and a Mars retrograde. So also some of you guys are focusing more on family planning and having children and that kind of stuff as well. So it might mean that you're preparing and getting ready for a status change that's less about your career, more about, okay, I was single, now I'm married, or, we were childless, now we have a kid. That could be the theme here as well. But there is definitely a goal to incentivize you, I think, to have something to work on. And I think about Mars going back into your 5th house, and it's going to be more about those things that you love or what you're kind of building or creating at home. So that starts with this realization of what's actually happening in the home space. You can create the space for that if that's something that you want to do. Okay. All right, guys. Well, that is the full moon in Gemini. Like I said, it's topsy-turvy. I'm filming this at the very beginning of December, so it's like the 2nd of December when I film this. So I don't even know what the craziness is going to be the next 2 weeks or so. So we'll be watching it in real time together, seeing it unfold. But let me know, what do you think about this full moon with the squares that we're seeing to Neptune, with the Mercury retrograde, the opposition to Jupiter, the square to Saturn? Are you guys having some mutable madness in your life? Leave me your comments below. Please leave me a thumbs up if you guys like this video, if you found it helpful. Equally, you can come back to this video and let me know how the full moon plays out for you. I love reading those comments. I get a lot of them. And it's always interesting to see how some of this stuff kind of pans out. So stay with me. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. And I will catch you guys back here on Thursday. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your week and this up and coming full moon in Gemini. Take care.